Welcome to the Black College Sports and Education Foundation Weekly Podcast, where we equip students, athletes, their families, and supporters with vital tools and information that will impact their decisions on educational opportunities and careers. Now, here's your host, Maurice L. Wilson.
Good evening and welcome to the Black College Sports and Education Foundation podcast. I am your host, Maurice L. Wilson, and thank you for tuning in. Tonight, we have an amazing show in store for you. But before I go any further, let me thank our sponsor who has made this show possible, and that is Black College Sports History and Legends. As I said earlier, I am excited about the show tonight. Joining me will be Dr. Emmanuel Lalande, Vice President for Enrollment Management at Benedict College, and he will be sharing with us information about his role at Benedict and the impact he's making on their goal to make Benedict a top academic institution in the Southeast. But before I bring him in, let me tell you a little bit about him. A graduate of Delaware State University, Dr. Lalande brings to the college over a decade of higher education and administration experience. In his new role, he will be responsible for recruiting some of the best and most promising students from across the country. Without further ado, please help me welcome my special guest, Dr. Emmanuel Lalande. Hello, Dr. Lalande.
Hello. Thank you for having me today.
No problem, and thank you so much for being here tonight, and welcome to the Black College Sports and Education Foundation podcast. Before we begin our conversation, please tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, first, I just want to, again, thank you, Mr. Hayes and Black College Sports and Education Foundation podcast for allowing me to share with you the best of BC, Benedict College in Columbia, South Carolina. I am a native of Brooklyn, New York, born and raised. Currently, I'm the Vice President for Enrollment Management. I started my career at my alma mater, Delaware State University in Delaware. Went from directors levels, various roles from director to assistant dean to dean of students to vice president at 3 institutions. So I'm just excited to be here at Benedict College at such a time as this.
Great, and we're excited to have you here. I was looking at your bio and was very impressed. My background is engineering, and I like numbers. And so I noticed in your bio, you have numbers about performance and impact. So for the audience, and just to kind of start the conversation, can you share what changes you put in place upon arriving at Benedict and the follow-on impact of that?
Sure. So Benedict College, founded in 1870 by Bathsheba Benedict, a woman, which is rare in our history when it comes to historically black colleges and universities. About 148 years later, Benedict College welcomed their first female president, Dr. Rosalind Clark Artis, who is the 14th and first female president. And upon her arrival, we have noticed, and you see the trends around the country, that tuition is skyrocketing around the country. So we wanted to take a bold stance on college affordability, making sure that when students leave college, they don't leave with an enormous amount of debt. So we did several things upon her arrival. We eliminated a long-standing open enrollment model. We lowered our tuition by 26%, and yes, that 26% translates to $12 million. We created a strategic and dedicated enrollment management division. That's where I come in. And we increased our first-year student support. Since those changes, and again, open enrollment is an important thing for access to education, but we also understood that students who are below a certain GPA, their chances of success is minimal. So we wanted to increase our academic profile, but yet at the same time wanted to make sure we were true to our mission. So we created a opportunity for those students who fall below our now academics admission standards and ensure that they had access. So we created a summer bridge program for students who are below a certain GPA, and that gave them an opportunity to take 2 classes in the summer and be able to enroll in the fall of that particular year. We have since increased application by 25%. We have new student enrollment that is up by 33%. We welcomed about 850 new students, and we have seen the largest freshman class in 6 years. And we have also expanded our footprint globally. So we have increased our international student enrollment by 75%. Diversity is important even at a historically black college. Since my arrival, we have hired a diversity recruiter who specifically will target non-African Americans and Hispanic students. Hispanic students for us is a growing population around the country, so I felt it was important to make sure that we are starting to look at that. We have just launched last summer our master's program, MBA program, Master's in Business Administration, where we will look to increase enrollment there. We have started some efforts in non-traditional populations such as active military, veterans, adult learners. We have partnered with an organization, institute, that's going to help us offer a plethora of online professional and career development courses to ensure that we continue to educate the workforce. We have taken a strong stance and look at our majors and our offering and ensure that those majors and offerings that are not doing too well, that we phase those out, and where there's a high demand, we wanted to increase that. So we added cybersecurity, which STEM is the focus, as you know, nationally. So we wanted to make sure that we offered things that cater to that high demanding field of study.
Wow. Okay. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but I am a Benedict alum. I'm a third generation Benedict. Okay. And I can tell you, just to kind of encapsulate the degree of change, I attended Benedict roughly 26 years ago now, and we were just going through adding the athletic teams back, the football team. We didn't have that stadium, that whole area that we now occupy, the physical footprint of the campus, was still in discussion. And just to kind of put a fine point on it, we didn't have high-speed internet on campus, and just to hear all of that, the cybersecurity, the attention to STEM, the broadening the range of students, and the effort to become integral in what's important today just shows the university's headed in the right direction. And with all of that, how do you state your value proposition to potential students? What do you guys kind of push or lead with when you're out recruiting?
Well, for us, it's making sure that students know that they can come to a place where 18-1, there are faculty and staff who care about them. There are folks who see them as, whether it's Emmanuel Lalande or Ed Hayes, making sure that they are not just a number. When I think about historically black college as a whole, education is power, so I don't take that away from anyone. However, you can go to a place that is not a historically black college and be tolerated, right? Or you can go to a place where you can be appreciated, right? So I see Benedict College as that place. When you think about our founder, Bathsheba Benedict, her goal in 1870 was to educate and produce citizens who would be a power for good in society, and we continue to commit to that every single day.
I run a financial services firm, and I always say, take your money where it's celebrated, not tolerated. So that definitely makes sense. And I'm familiar with your president, Dr. Artis. I went to Tennessee State as well, and some of the faculty there called her to my attention. So I looked her up, and I felt like, wow, she's got a pretty impressive resume. I felt like the college was in good hands. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And so to that end, I want to talk about, I was reading in your bio, and you guys have a goal of becoming a top academic institution in the Southeast. What does that look like in the opinion of the leaders of the school? Like, how will you know you've arrived at that goal?
Well, for us, it's ensuring that when our students graduate, that they graduate and leave with high-paying jobs. For us, it's ensuring that we are strategically partnering with organizations and jobs that will help our students and create an environment and experience for our students to be competitive in the job world. So we have a study abroad opportunity where we had students go to China. We had students go to Israel this past Christmas. We had students go to Barcelona. So making sure that they are not only being educated here in class, but also making sure that they understand the world that we live in and seeing the world. We have students who are coming from low-income, first-gen students who the only thing they know is where they're from. Right, so most of our students are from Georgia, most of our students are from North Carolina, and of course South Carolina, and probably never left that particular state. So offering them a different experience outside of what they're used to, we believe when they graduate will make them competitive. So for us, seeing a student walk across that stage and understanding that they are leaving with a wealth of knowledge and they're equipped to compete with anybody in their particular field is for us the goal.
Definitely. And those types of programs are important. When I chose Benedict, one of the leading reasons was that they were doing a dual degree program with a number of other institutions across the country. So I could get a good foundation at Benedict and then use that to bridge out into other schools and continue on my education, knowing that I got, those first 2 to 3 years of college are so important in terms of the attention that you get, feeling like you're at home, not getting overwhelmed so that you can focus on the studies, focus on growing up as a person. And I got that nurturing environment from Benedict through a precursor to what we call STEM today. And Benedict did it with a number of institutions. So that's very important. Mm-hmm. Again, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to the Black College Sports and Education Foundation podcast with me, your host, Maurice L. Wilson, and my special guest tonight is Dr. Emmanuel Lalande, and he is here to share insights and discuss his role at Benedict and the impact he's making on their goal to make Benedict a top academic institution. Dr. Lalande, I wanted to ask you, everybody has competition. So I hear a lot about Claflin. Of course, everybody knows South Carolina State. Who do you guys not maybe view as competition, but when a student comes and they're considering other schools, how do you think you differ from some of the other schools that people would say, okay, I'm considering this school versus Benedict?
That's a loaded question, and I'm pretty passionate about historically black colleges and universities. What we tend to do in our community is we tend to think that we are competing against each other, and I think that is the wrong approach. So I never will ever see another person in my community, in this case historically black colleges, as a competition. And here's the reason why. So when you think about the education landscape, there's a couple of things that we need to pay attention to that will harm a historically black college and university. One, in particular, you start to see a lot of those top-tier institutions that are beginning to do away with ACT or SAT requirements, and that's important to pay attention to. The other thing is you'll start to see that institutions who are considered top tier start to allow first-generation low-income students into their college or university. That's another thing to pay attention to, right? Those things are important because when it comes to historically black colleges and universities, those institutions played a role in attracting the very students who have issues with or don't do well on standardized tests. Those students are very well the first generation low-income students. So when you see those bigger schools start to, oh, well, you know what, we're going to do away with that. Why? It's because they say in about 2025 to 2027, roughly around that year, that there will be an enrollment crisis. And the reason for that, you'll start to see, folks are not having children as they should or they have been in the past. The birth rate has been slowing down, which means high school graduation rate will decrease. So we have to look in many different ways. So when it comes to like competition, our competition is the institutions that are starting to attract our students, right? From our community. From our community.
Coaching.
So, right. So when I look at South Carolina, I pay attention to Francis Marion. I pay attention to Coastal Carolina. I pay attention to Wofford. I pay attention to Lander. Those are the institutions that I primarily pay attention to because I see the nuances and the little subtle ways they go about reaching out to students in our community. But what is important when it comes to addressing the impeding enrollment crisis, what is important is that HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, begin to diversify their student population, hence making sure that we are reaching out to the Hispanic community, hence making sure that we are reaching out to people who don't look like brown or black people, hence reaching out to the international community, whether it's Asia, the continent of Africa, etc., making sure that we diversify our student body by non-traditional students. How do we make sure that those adult learners are still being educated for whatever field they're currently in? How do we make sure those active military folks who are coming back from war still are educated? How do we expand on our online platform? How do we make sure that our students are being serviced the way they should at any other institutions? So for me, the competition is not the Claflin. The competition for me is the subtleness of other institutions that are beginning to realize, yeah, you know what? We should have black and brown people on our campus. and we should make sure that they are here. So I see those folks as our competition.
You know, and that's a great way of putting it. And what I take from that is, in a changing demographic landscape, and you're right, as a financial advisor, the falling, what they call demographic dividend is real, where you're not reproducing at nearly the rate you've done in the past, particularly in your developed countries. And so it's starting to impact everything. It's almost a reverse baby boom, if you think about it.
Yes, that's exactly it.
So to me, if you rethink about who you think your competition is, your advantage, in my opinion, would be that schools like Benedict have a history of inclusion that goes back to 1870, right? And, you know, we've been welcoming these students. And so that's not something we're doing because it's convenient. It's who we are. And so that's something that I think not only Benedict, but HBCUs as a whole can take. And if I'm sending my two daughters out into the world, this is a place I would consider as a place for them to matriculate.
Also, want to add, in the last 5 to 7 years, there's been a shift in black-owned, right? Black and brown-owned, or by black, or whatever the case is. But there's never a conversation about education, right? That's never in that conversation when it comes to ensuring that black educated, right? Educate black, because we have this mentality that if I went to a USC or I went to a Harvard or anything like that, then I'm superior, right?
Right.
But at the end of the day, they still look at us the same way. We still are being gunned down in the street. We still are being, from a Hispanic standpoint, being deported left and right and disrespected. So if we're going to talk about supporting each other, we have to do that in a holistic way when we think about historically black college, the same way we think about buying a black-owned business.
I agree with that totally. That is something that I think when President Obama was elected, there was a lot of talk about, are we post-racial? I think some of that's been settled, but one of the lessons I took from the Obama administration is here was a gentleman who was educated at supposedly the best schools in the country, and did everything you would want someone to do who was the first, first female, first African-American, first minority in any group, and still was disrespected at a level that we had never seen before. So the lesson I took was, don't betray who you are to live up to a standard, because the standard is not there that will gain acceptance, at least right now. Maybe in the future something will change. And I do believe we should definitely educate at our schools. And having gone through 2 HBCUs, I'm on board with that.
Absolutely.
Dr. Lalande, thank you for being here with me this evening. We are running out of time, but before we end our conversation, we would love for you to share any last words of encouragement at this time, or something that you didn't mention earlier but would like to mention now.
That's a good one. I'm going to reiterate my point when it comes to historically black colleges and universities. You can go to a place where you are tolerated or go to a place where you are appreciated. And Benedict College continues to educate black and brown people to be powers for good in society. And education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And for us, Benedict College is that place where we believe we will continue to produce change makers. So thank you for your time and your gratitude for allowing me to talk about the best of BC.
Definitely. This has been very informative. I've definitely learned some things and have learned to think a little bit differently about HBCUs when it comes to buying black and supporting our community's institutions. I think that is something that we don't really appreciate with the HBCUs. They're repositories of our history, and there are tons of stats about engineers who come out of HBCUs making up the majority of black engineers, and you can apply that, down the line to a lot of different professions. So the track record is there.
Absolutely.
Before you go, please share any upcoming events that your school is having and your social media information so that we can stay connected and support you in your efforts.
Sure. So we have some exciting things happening. We have our 31st annual Harambe Festival that is taking place beginning Friday, February 28th in our gym. We also have our Spring 2020 open house, which will take place Friday, April 3rd, 2020. When it comes to my social media, you can follow me on Facebook at Emmanuel Lalande or my Instagram at dr.lalande. So that's dr.lalande. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm on all of them.
Definitely. Well, Dr. Lalande, thank you for spending time with us today. I wish you continued success, and I want you to have a wonderful evening. And when I'm in town, I will stop by your office.
Let's definitely do that. Thank you for your time, and thank you for all that you do. We need voices like you, and God bless you, and God bless the show.
Thank you very much.
All right, bye.
That was Dr. Emmanuel Lalande, and he said some amazing things. One of the things I took away was just the efforts that they're making at Benedict to diversify the student base, to reach out internationally. As a attendee of Benedict College, these were things that practically were unheard of 24 years ago, 25 years ago. So it's showing that the institution is definitely has an eye towards growth and the future. And another thing he said that I thought was very interesting was that we need to include our HBCUs when we talk about supporting African-American-owned institutions. These institutions are, first, a repository of African-American history and also a producer of the future leaders of our community. And so we need to nurture them with our time, talent, and treasure. And with leaders like Dr. Lalande in place at Benedict, I feel that it's a good investment and you're in good hands if you are sending your children or family members there. Join me next week for another amazing show, and you can follow me on social media at The Real Maurice L. Wilson on Instagram. You can also find me on Facebook at Maurice L. Wilson, and I'm on LinkedIn with Maurice L. Wilson. Remember, money doesn't make you happy, but it does give you options. Have a blessed week. Goodbye.
Thank you for tuning in to our podcast. To become a sponsor, contact Ed J. Hayes at ed.j.hayes@gmail.com. That's edd.j.hayes@gmail.com. To donate, send contributions to www.paypal.me/BCSEF. Also, connect with Maurice on Instagram at The Real Maurice L. Wilson and Facebook and LinkedIn at Maurice L. Wilson. Be sure to join us next week for another amazing show.